Inside the most dangerous prisons in America, a look at the inmates. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you're ready to step inside a place most people never come back from. Because once you hear this story, it won't let you go. The sirens were already fading when the body was found. It lay wedged between two dumpsters behind a shuttered auto shop on the outskirts of Florence, Colorado, less than 10 miles from the razor-wire silhouette of the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, ADX Florence. The morning air was sharp and thin, the kind that burns your lungs and keeps secrets frozen. A sanitation worker spotted the shoes first. State-issued boots. Prison issue. By the time Detective Marcus Hale arrived, the alley was sealed off, red and blue lights painting the brick walls like a warning. The victim's face had been carefully arranged, eyes closed, hands folded over the chest. No wallet, no phone, just a folded slip of paper tucked beneath the collar. 3 words were written in block letters. Still watching you. The dead man was identified within the hour. Daniel Mercer, 34, former federal inmate, released 6 weeks earlier after serving 10 years for armed robbery and assault. He had survived some of the harshest prisons in America, including a brief but unforgettable stay at ADX Florence, the prison known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Detective Hale stared at the paper longer than he should have. Threat notes weren't unusual, but this felt different. Personal, like a message meant for someone else. Mercer wasn't supposed to be here. According to his parole file, he was registered in Kansas City, working construction, attending mandatory check-ins, staying clean, yet his body was dumped near the most secure prison in the country, a place designed to isolate the worst of the worst. Men who disappeared into concrete boxes and were rarely heard from again. Hale's phone buzzed. A text from Special Investigator Elaine Carter, Bureau of Prisons. Don't move the body. I'm on my way. Elaine Carter arrived 40 minutes later, her expression tight, eyes already scanning the scene. She had spent 15 years auditing high-risk federal facilities, investigating corruption, inmate violence, and unexplained deaths that never made the news. ADX Florence was always at the center of her files, even when it wasn't officially named. This wasn't random, she said quietly, crouching near Mercer's body. He was sending messages before he got out. What kind of messages? Hale asked. Elaine stood and met his eyes. Warnings. Inside Mercer's prison record were dozens of disciplinary reports, solitary confinement extensions, restricted communication orders. One note, buried deep in the file, stood out. A handwritten complaint submitted 2 years before his release. There are men in here who don't plan to leave. They run things from the inside. If I talk, I'm dead. At the time, it had been dismissed as paranoia. Inmates talk like that all the time. Now Mercer was dead. As news of the body spread, phones rang across 3 states. Parole officers scrambled. Prison administrators locked down units. Inside ADX Florence, inmates were confined to their cells for 23 hours a day, as always, but the tension was different. Guards reported unusual behavior. Coded knocking on walls, synchronized light flickers through narrow windows, men refusing meals as if waiting for something. One name surfaced repeatedly during Elaine's preliminary review. Isaiah Crow. Crow was serving a life sentence without parole for orchestrating multiple violent crimes across state lines. Officially, he was listed as high-risk non-communicative. Unofficially, guards whispered that Crow had influence far beyond his concrete cell. That favors were traded. That information moved. That men on the outside still answered to him. Daniel Mercer had shared a unit with Crow during his final year inside. When investigators searched Mercer's last known residence, a cheap motel room paid for in cash, they found the walls covered in scribbled notes, dates, times, prison ID numbers, and one phrase written over and over, growing darker each time. They don't let you leave. Security footage from the motel showed Mercer pacing the hallway the night before his death, repeatedly checking the exit. At 2:17 a.m., he answered a knock at his door. The camera glitched for 9 seconds. When the feed returned, Mercer was gone. No struggle was recorded. No raised voices. Whoever came for him knew exactly how to do it quietly. Elaine Carter requested an emergency warrant to review internal communications at ADX Florence. Staff emails, guard rotations, maintenance logs. The request was denied within the hour. Too sensitive. Too dangerous. Too much liability. That denial told her everything she needed to know. Late that night, as Detective Hale prepared his report, a courier delivered a sealed envelope to the precinct. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, grainy and black and white. It showed Daniel Mercer inside a prison cell, taken less than 48 hours before his release. Behind him, carved faintly into the concrete wall, were the same 3 words found on his body: "Still watching you." But when Elaine enlarged the image, her breath caught, because beneath the words was a symbol she recognized, one that was never supposed to exist outside the walls of America's most dangerous prisons. And if it did, it meant the inmates weren't just watching anymore. By sunrise, ADX Florence was under an unofficial lockdown.
We need to address the
press release,
concerns raised in the
no
report
public
immediately.
statement, just a silent tightening of the screws. Guard rotations were altered without explanation. Surveillance audits were quietly launched. Elaine Carter stood in the administrative wing, watching steel doors seal one after another, each echo sounding like a warning rather than a precaution. The symbol from the photograph wouldn't leave her mind. It wasn't gang-related in the traditional sense. No tattoos, no colors, no public affiliation. It was something far older, passed quietly between inmates who never expected to see daylight again. A mark used by prisoners who believed the system didn't just cage them, it consumed them. Men who built networks not with violence alone, but with patience, leverage, and secrets. Men like Isaiah Crow. Crow's cell was a concrete tomb, 7 by 12 feet, no windows to the outside. When Elaine finally secured permission to review his behavioral logs, the pattern was impossible to ignore. On the same nights Mercer had filed complaints, Crow had been granted maintenance-related cell access, short durations, no cameras, always justified, always approved. "You don't move like this without help," Detective Hale muttered, scanning the timeline. Someone's opening doors. That someone became clearer when a guard failed to report for duty. Officer Lucas Brand had worked ADX Florence for 8 years. Clean record. No financial red flags. No disciplinary actions. When supervisors checked his home, the lights were on, the car still warm in the driveway, dinner half-eaten on the table. Brant was gone. Security footage from a highway gas station outside Pueblo captured his truck heading south at 3:41 a.m. No passengers visible. No signs of distress. Just a man driving calmly toward nowhere. 2 hours later, his vehicle was found abandoned near the New Mexico border, wiped clean. The message was unmistakable. Someone inside the prison had reached far beyond it. As pressure mounted, Elaine pushed for interviews with inmates who had crossed paths with Mercer. Most gave nothing. Blank stares. Shrugs. Silence born from survival. Until one man asked a single question before speaking. "Is Crow still locked down?" When Elaine didn't answer, the inmate leaned closer to the reinforced glass. "Then you're already too late." According to him, Crow didn't issue orders directly. He didn't need to. He planted ideas, created debts, offered protection inside for favors outside. A phone smuggled here. A guard compromised there. A parole officer paid to look the other way. And when someone tried to walk away, the prison reminded them it never truly let go. Daniel Mercer had tried to disappear. Instead, he became an example. That night, Elaine received a call she wasn't supposed to get. The line crackled, untraceable. "Their cleaning house." The voice said, "Mail. Calm. Familiar. You keep pulling threads, more people vanish." "Who is this?" she demanded. A pause. Then, softly, someone who already talked once. The line went dead. Minutes later, an alert flashed across internal systems. Surveillance blackout. Unit C3. Isaiah Crow's wing. By the time power was restored, 2 inmates were unresponsive. No visible injuries. Official cause, medical emergencies. Unofficially, Guards whisper that both men had been scheduled to testify in unrelated internal investigations. Elaine stood on the tier, the smell of disinfectant thick in the air, watching medics wheel the bodies away. Crow's cell door remained shut. Inside, he sat calmly on his bed, hands folded, staring straight ahead. He never looked at her, but as she turned to leave, a guard quietly slipped something into her hand. A folded piece of paper. No words, just a time, a date, and a location. Kansas City. 3 nights from now. Attached was a parole badge number. Daniel Mercer's. The realization hit hard and cold. Mercer hadn't been running from the prison. He had been trying to meet someone. Back in Kansas City, Detective Hale tracked down Mercer's final phone pings, an old prepaid device he'd kept off the books. The last call place wasn't to family or friends. It was the Federal Oversight Hotline, flagged but never answered. Voicemail recovered. Mercer's voice shook as he spoke. If anything happens to me, it wasn't random. They're using the system itself. Guards, transfers, releases. ADX isn't a prison anymore. It's a command center. The call ended abruptly, as if someone had entered the room. Elaine listened to the recording twice, then a third time. Beneath Mercer's voice, barely audible, was another sound. Rhythmic, metallic, a door locking. The next morning, headlines broke across local news. Federal officer missing amid prison investigation. Lucas Brandt's face stared back from every screen. The Bureau called it unrelated. A coincidence. Elaine knew better. She returned to ADX Florence to find Crow had been transferred overnight. No paperwork. No destination listed. Just an empty cell. And carved into the wall, beneath layers of fresh paint that hadn't quite dried, were 3 familiar words. Still watching you. Because Crow wasn't running. He was moving closer. And whatever Daniel Mercer had tried to expose was no longer buried inside America's most dangerous prison. It was loose. Kansas City felt ordinary in the way danger often does. Morning traffic hummed. Coffee shops opened. Office lights flickered on. No one noticed the unmarked sedan parked across from the federal building, or the woman inside gripping a folder like it could bite back. Elaine Carter hadn't slept. The time and date on the paper matched today. The location matched the Oversight and Internal Affairs office, exactly where Daniel Mercer had tried to leave his final message. Detective Marcus Hale joined her just after dawn. If this is a trap, he said, it's a bold one. Elaine didn't look away from the building. That's the point. Inside, the meeting room was empty except for one man seated at the far end of the table. Mid-50s, clean cut, federal credentials clipped neatly to his jacket. He smiled like someone used to being trusted. Ms. Carter, he said, Detective, thank you for coming. He introduced himself as Deputy Director Samuel Rourke, Bureau of Prisons Oversight, a name Elaine recognized instantly. Rourke had signed off on dozens of sealed reports involving ADX Florence. Reports that went nowhere. Complaints that vanished. You've been investigating the wrong thing, Rourke said calmly, folding his hands. ADX Florence isn't the problem. It's the solution. Elaine felt the room tighten. For decades, Rourke continued, we locked away the most dangerous criminals in the country and hoped isolation would end them. It didn't. It refined them. They learned patience, strategy, influence. We adapted. By letting them run things? Hale snapped. By using them, Rourke replied. Intelligence, leverage, control. You'd be shocked how many threats never reach the public because of what happens inside those walls. Elaine thought of Mercer, of Brandt, of the inmates who had died quietly in the dark. And when someone wants out? She asked. Rourke's smile thinned. No one truly leaves. He slid a file across the table. Inside were transfer orders, sealed authorizations, and financial trails buried beneath shell contracts. Guards paid not a look. Inmates released early, only to disappear. Others kept alive because they were useful. Isaiah Crow's name appeared everywhere. He's not missing, Rourke said. He's reassigned. Elaine's phone vibrated. An alert from a secure channel she didn't recognize. You came anyway. Attached was a live video feed. Crow stared back at her from the screen, older than his photos, eyes steady, expression almost gentle. Behind him wasn't a cell. It was an office, government issued, flag in the corner. I warned Mercer, Crow said evenly. I warned the guard. I warned you. Elaine stood so fast her chair scraped loudly. This ends now. Crow tilted his head. It already has. Outside, sirens wailed, not rushing toward the building, but away from it. News alerts exploded across phones. A federal transport vehicle had crashed outside St. Louis. Multiple casualties. Classified detainees involved. Names withheld. Among the dead, Lucas Brandt. Official reports called it an accident. Rourke rose from his seat. You have a choice, he said. Walk away, or become part of the system you're trying to dismantle. Hale's hand moved subtly toward his weapon. Elaine didn't hesitate. She slammed the folder shut. This goes public. Rourke laughed softly. It never does. But he was wrong. Elaine had already sent the files. Not to one outlet, but dozens. Independent journalists. International watchdogs. Redundant drops timed to release automatically, even if she vanished. Within hours, the story broke. Not everything. Not names like Crow or Rourke, but enough. Secret oversight failures. Disappearing inmates. Unexplained deaths linked to ADX Florence. Congressional hearings were announced. Officials resigned. Cameras pointed toward places that had lived in shadow for decades. Isaiah Crow was officially declared deceased during a classified transfer. No body was ever released. ADX Florence remained open. Months later, Elaine stood alone outside the prison gates, winter wind cutting through her coat. The case was closed. That was the word they used. But some nights, she still heard the sound from Mercer's voicemail in her dreams. A door locking. 3 months after the hearings, a body was found behind a warehouse in rural Nebraska. Male, former federal inmate, recently released. Tucked beneath his collar was a folded slip of paper. 3 words. Still watching you. The prison denied any connection. The system moved on. And somewhere, in a place that didn't officially exist, a man who was never supposed to leave smiled quietly. Because some prisons don't need walls. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one.